I had always believed my voice could save me. For years it carried me through fear, through doubt, through rooms where love felt conditional and silence felt dangerous. When I sang, people listened. When I sang, doors opened. When I sang, the world softened, at least for a moment. My voice was my shield, my refuge, my proof that I belonged. Until one night, it wasn't enough. That night didn't happen under blinding stage lights or in front of screaming crowds. There was no orchestra swelling behind me, no applause waiting to catch me if I fell. It happened quietly, in a place where music couldn't reach and fame offered no protection. A place where I realized something that terrified me more than any bad review or rumor ever could. A gift, no matter how powerful, cannot fix everything. I remember the stillness. The silence felt heavier than any noise I had ever faced. I realized how exhausted I was from believing that if I just sang better, louder, more beautifully, the pain would eventually disappear. The world wanted the voice. Pure, perfect, endless. But it never asked what it cost to keep delivering it. That night forced me to face a truth I had been running from for years. Talent doesn't replace safety. Admiration doesn't equal love. And being celebrated doesn't mean being understood. Behind the success, behind the awards, behind the image everyone adored, there was a woman struggling to hold herself together once the music stopped. This story begins at the exact moment when my voice stopped being my solution and became a mirror that showed me everything I had avoided, everything I feared, and everything I could no longer ignore. And once that realization took hold, nothing about my life, my music, or my choices would ever be the same again. If you're ready to step behind the curtain and discover what happens when even the strongest voice reaches its limit, stay with this story until the end. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. The night everything began to unravel, I was standing in a hotel bathroom in Chicago, staring at my reflection like I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. The mirror was too honest under that harsh white light. My makeup was perfect, my hair styled exactly the way people expected Whitney Houston to look before a show. From the outside I was ready. Inside I felt hollow. Not empty, hollow. Like something had been scooped out and replaced with expectation. I could hear the muffled roar of the crowd through the walls. Thousands of people. Sold out. Again. My name echoed through the arena, even though I wasn't on stage yet. They were already cheering for the idea of me. Not the person standing barefoot on cold tile, gripping the edge of a sink just to steady her breathing. 5 minutes, Whitney. Someone called through the door. I didn't answer. 5 minutes felt like 5 miles. I closed my eyes and tried to do what I'd done my whole life. Breathe, pray, trust the voice. Singing had always been the one place where I didn't have to explain myself. Where I didn't have to be strong or composed or polite. I just opened my mouth, and the truth came out in sound. But that night my chest felt tight. My throat felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. I leaned closer to the mirror and whispered, "You've got this." The words sounded weak, even to me. Backstage was chaos when I finally stepped out. Cables everywhere. Crew members rushing. The smell of sweat, metal, and perfume blending into something sharp and overwhelming. People smiled at me. Big, confident smiles, but their eyes flicked over me quickly, checking. Assessing. Was I okay? Was I ready? Would I deliver? No one asked the questions out loud. They never did. Clive was there, nodding at me with reassurance that felt rehearsed. My manager squeezed my hand and said, "You're going to be incredible tonight." I nodded back, playing my part, even though something deep inside me whispered that incredible was becoming a prison. As the intro music started, the lights dimmed. The crowd exploded. The sound hit me like a wave, and for a split second, instinct kicked in. This was my place. This was where I belonged. I walked onto the stage, and the applause wrapped around me like armor. The first song went well. The second too. Muscle memory carried me, every note landing exactly where it should. The crowd sang with me, cried with me, loved me. From the outside it was flawless. But somewhere between the third and fourth song, something shifted. It was subtle at first. A note that felt harder to reach. A breath that didn't come as easily. I smiled through it, adjusted, kept going. I had done this 1,000 times before. No one noticed, except me. By the fifth song my heart was racing, not from excitement but from fear. A cold, creeping fear that crawled up my spine and settled in my throat. I could hear my own voice, but it felt distant, like it was coming from another room. I finished the song to thunderous applause, bowed, and turned toward the band for the next cue. That's when it hit me. A sudden wave of dizziness. The light seemed too bright, too close. My ears rang. For the first time in my career standing center stage, I had the terrifying thought, what if I can't do this tonight? I tightened my grip on the microphone and forced myself to sing the next line. The note came out, technically correct, professionally delivered, but it didn't feel like mine. Felt borrowed, fragile. The crowd cheered louder, unaware that something was breaking in front of them. By the time I walked off stage for the brief intermission, my legs were shaking. I barely made it to the chair in my dressing room before sitting down hard, my hands trembling. My assistant rushed in. "Whitney, are you okay?" I opened my mouth to answer, to joke, to deflect, to reassure, but no sound came out. And in that silence, I realized something that scared me more than any missed note ever could. For the first time in my life, my voice hadn't saved me. I sat there in the dressing room, staring at my hands like they belonged to a stranger. They wouldn't stop shaking. No matter how tightly I pressed my palms against my thighs, the tremor ran through my fingers, up my arms, straight into my chest. The applause outside the walls felt distant now, like it was happening in another building, another life. Someone knocked softly on the door, then harder. "Whitney, we've got 8 minutes, my manager said, trying to keep his voice calm. 8 minutes. Long enough for panic to bloom. "I just need a second," I said, finally finding my voice. It sounded steady, which almost made it worse. I had learned how to lie with my tone long before I learned how to tell the truth. The room smelled like hairspray and nerves. Costumes hung neatly along the wall, untouched, perfect. I felt like an intruder among them. The woman inside the clothes didn't match the image stitched into the fabric. I closed my eyes and leaned back, listening to my heartbeat. Too fast. Too loud. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a ribbon around my ribs and pulled until breathing became a negotiation. A memory crept in uninvited. Me as a little girl in Newark, standing in church, singing without thinking, without fear. No lights, no contracts, no expectations, just sound and faith and joy. I used to believe that feeling would never leave me. Now it felt like a myth. "Whitney," my assistant said gently, kneeling in front of me. "Talk to me." I wanted to. I wanted to say, "I'm scared. I don't feel like myself. I don't know how much longer I can pretend everything is fine." But those words stayed trapped behind my teeth. Admitting weakness felt dangerous. I had built an empire on strength. "I'm fine," I said instead. "Just tired." Everyone nodded. That was an answer they knew how to handle. Someone handed me water. Someone else adjusted my mic pack. Someone reminded me of the set list, like I might forget the songs that had shaped my entire life. They were all doing their jobs, and I was doing mine. Smiling, reassuring, performing composure backstage. But something inside me was unraveling quietly. As the minutes ticked down, a strange thought surfaced. What if this wasn't about tonight? What if this was about everything I had been carrying for years? The pressure to be perfect. The fear of disappointing everyone. The exhaustion of being admired but never fully known. The intermission music faded. The crowd grew louder again, restless, hungry for more. "You ready?" my manager asked. I stood up, legs still unsteady, and nodded. Ready had become a word without meaning. As I walked back toward the stage, the corridor felt longer than before. The walls seemed to close in. I brushed my hand along them just to ground myself, reminding my body that I was real, that I was here. The lights flared as I stepped out again. The roar of the crowd rushed over me, and instinct tried to take control. Smiled. Wave. I thanked them for waiting. My voice sounded strong through the speakers, and the audience responded like everything was exactly as it should be. But the moment the music started again, the fear returned, sharper this time. Every note felt like a test. Every breath felt measured. I wasn't singing freely. I was calculating survival. Don't push too hard. Don't crack. Don't let them see. Halfway through the song, I caught sight of someone in the front row, a woman clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face as she sang every word with me. She looked at me like I was saving her. The realization hit me like a blow. How could I save anyone when I felt like I was drowning? My voice held. The song ended. The crowd erupted. From the outside, it was another triumph. Inside, something fractured. As I stood there, bathed in light, smiling for thousands of strangers, I felt an overwhelming urge to run. Not off stage, away. Away from the expectations, the noise, the image. Away from the version of me everyone demanded. The next song cue flashed on the monitor. I took a breath, raised the microphone again, and suddenly felt a sharp pain shoot through my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. For a split second, the world tilted. And I wondered if the audience was about to witness the moment when Whitney Houston finally couldn't hold it together anymore. The pain didn't knock me down. It froze me in place. For a heartbeat that felt endless, I stood there under the lights, microphone lifted, lungs refusing to cooperate. The band kept playing, smooth and confident, unaware that something inside me had gone dangerously quiet. I could hear the crowd, feel their energy pressing toward me, but my body wasn't responding the way it always had. Smiled. That smile had saved me more times than I could count. I shifted my weight, took a shallow breath through my nose, and let the next line fall out softer than planned. The audience leaned in instead of pulling away. They thought it was intimacy. They thought it was artistry. They had no idea it was survival. By the end of the song, my chest was burning, my throat raw. Applause thundered, and I bowed, buying myself a few seconds to breathe without singing. My heart hammered so hard I wondered if the microphone was picking it up. I glanced toward the wings of the stage. My manager was there now, eyes locked on me, his confident expression cracking just slightly. He knew something was wrong. He had seen every version of me. Tired Whitney, angry Whitney, unstoppable Whitney. But this one was new. I turned back to the crowd before he could reach me. "Thank you," I said, my voice warm, practiced. "Y'all okay tonight?" They screamed louder. If they only knew. As the band transitioned, my thoughts drifted somewhere dangerous. I wasn't thinking about the next song. I was thinking about how long I had been ignoring the signs. The nights I couldn't sleep. The mornings I woke up already exhausted. The quiet fear that followed me even in rooms full of love. I had told myself it was temporary. Just a phase. Just pressure. Just life. But standing there, breath by breath, I realized I had been bargaining with my own limits for years. The next song began. One of my favorites, one that usually felt like coming home. I closed my eyes and tried to let muscle memory take over. For a moment it worked. My voice found its place. The melody carried me forward. Then, halfway through, emotion surged unexpectedly. Not the kind I could shape into sound, the kind that cracked open old wounds. I saw flashes of my past like lightning behind my eyes. Little Whitney in church. Whitney on her first big stage. Whitney promising herself she would never let fear win. Whitney smiling through moments that should have broken her. My voice wavered. Just slightly. Probably no one noticed. I did. Panic flared. I tightened my grip on the microphone and pushed harder, trying to overpower the feeling. The note came out strong, but it cost me. A sharp dizziness followed, and for a terrifying second, the stage lights blurred. I opened my eyes quickly, grounding myself in the faces before me. Thousands of them. Loving me. Depending on me. The weight of that expectation pressed down on my chest harder than the pain had. By the time the song ended, my heart was racing again. I turned toward the band for the next cue, but instead of stepping forward, I felt myself hesitate. That hesitation was dangerous. "Whitney," the band leader mouthed. I nodded, forcing myself to move. The show had a rhythm, and stopping it would raise questions. Questions I wasn't ready to answer. But as I took my place for the next number, something caught my eye near the side of the stage. A security guard was speaking urgently into his radio, glancing toward the crowd. Another guard moved closer to the barricade, scanning faces. My pulse spiked. I kept singing, but my attention fractured. Between lines, I watched the movement near the front rows. Small disturbance. A ripple of tension where there had been nothing but joy moments before. Someone was pushing forward. The guard stepped in, blocking them. The crowd murmured but kept clapping, unaware that anything was wrong. From where I stood, I could see just enough to know this wasn't a fan trying to get closer. This was different. The song ended. Applause rose again, but my hands were cold now. My chest tightened, not from exhaustion, from instinct. As I bowed, my manager rushed toward the stage, his face pale. "Whitney," he said quickly when I reached the wings. "We might need to cut the set short." "Why?" I whispered. He glanced back toward the crowd, then met my eyes. "There's someone here asking for you," he said. "And they're not leaving." Before I could ask another question, a loud shout cut through the arena, a voice calling my name, raw and desperate. And in that moment, I knew the night wasn't just about my voice anymore. The shout echoed through the arena like a crack in glass. I froze just beyond the curtain, the music still ringing behind me, my name hanging in the air in a way that felt wrong, stripped of admiration, heavy with urgency. The crowd laughed nervously at first, thinking it was part of the chaos, part of loving me too loudly. But I knew better. You don't spend a lifetime listening to voices without learning when one carries danger. "Whitney!" the voice shouted again. My manager stepped in front of me instinctively, his hand firm on my arm. "Don't move," he said under his breath. Security swarmed toward the front of the stage. I could see flashes of motion between bodies, arms raised, people turning in their seats to look. The band kept playing softly, trying to smooth the moment, but the rhythm had lost its magic. Something ugly had entered the room. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. My manager hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Someone from your past," he said carefully. "They slipped through security earlier. We didn't think." The shout came again, closer now. "You can't ignore me, Whitney." My chest tightened, and not from the earlier pain. This was a different kind of fear, sharp, personal, familiar. My mind raced through faces, memories, people I had tried to leave behind. Fame has a way of turning unfinished business into public spectacle. "I need to see them," I said. "No," my manager replied immediately. "Absolutely not." But the word see wasn't really about looking. It was about control. About not being ambushed by my own history in front of thousands of people. The music stopped. Silence fell over the arena in a way applause never could. The crowd sensed the shift now, the wrongness of it. Murmurs rippled outward like waves. Security dragged a man toward the aisle, his voice hoarse as he struggled. "You owe me," he shouted. "You can't pretend I don't exist." Every muscle in my body went rigid. I knew that voice. My breath caught in my throat, and suddenly the stage lights felt blinding, exposing me in ways cameras never had. I had spent years convincing myself that chapter was closed, buried beneath success and distance. But here it was, clawing its way back into my life in the worst possible place. "I'm going back out," I said. "Whitney, no," my assistant pleaded. "Please." But my feet were already moving. If I stayed hidden, the story would be written without me. If I faced it, at least I would own my silence. As I stepped back onto the stage, the crowd erupted. Confused applause mixed with uneasy cheers. I raised my hand gently, asking for quiet. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it could be heard through the speakers. "It's okay," I said into the microphone. "Everything's okay." The lie tasted bitter. Security had stopped the man near the front. From where I stood, I could see his face clearly now. Older, rougher, eyes burning with something unresolved. Regret, anger, desperation. Maybe all three. Our eyes locked. In that instant the years collapsed. Promises made in private. Warnings ignored. Choices I thought I had outgrown. "I just want to talk to you," he shouted. "You don't get to erase me." The crowd was silent now. Thousands of people holding their breath, waiting to see what Whitney Houston would do next. Icon. Voice. The woman. My manager hovered at the edge of the stage, signaling me to stop, to retreat, to protect the show. But this wasn't about the show anymore. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, my pulse racing. "This isn't the place," I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. "You need to leave." He laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You were never good at facing things in public." The words hit harder than any insult. Because they were true. The crowd began to stir again, tension rising like static. Security tightened their grip on him, preparing to drag him away. And then he said the one thing I wasn't ready for. "Tell them why you're really afraid to sing tonight." The arena erupted into gasps. My vision blurred. My chest constricted. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to let the noise swallow the moment whole. But standing there, exposed and shaking, I realized the night had reached a point of no return. Because whatever he knew, whatever he was about to say, could shatter far more than my voice. For a moment I couldn't hear anything at all. Not the crowd. Not security shouting. Not even my own breathing. His words echoed inside me, louder than the speakers ever could. "Tell them why you're really afraid to sing tonight." He had aimed straight for the place I kept locked away, the place no amount of applause could reach. I felt exposed in a way I never had before. Not by tabloids, not by rumors, not by critics. This was different. This was someone who knew pieces of me from before the armor was fully built. Security pulled him back, his voice dissolving into chaos as the crowd erupted into confused noise. People stood up. Some shouted for him to be removed. Others shouted my name, trying to protect me with sound alone. Cameras swung wildly, hungry for whatever was about to happen next. My manager grabbed my arm. "We're ending the show. Now." I nodded automatically, but my feet didn't move. I was still staring at the space where that man had been, my chest rising and falling too fast. Ending the show would protect the brand. It would protect the image. It wouldn't protect me. "Whitney," my manager said again, more urgently. I raised my hand, stopping him. The microphone was still warm in my palm. Thousands of eyes were on me, waiting, expecting reassurance, expecting magic. What they got was silence. I walked back to center stage slowly, every step heavy. The band stayed frozen, unsure. The lights softened, almost instinctively, as if the crew sensed something fragile unfolding. "I'm sorry," I said into the microphone. My voice wasn't strong. It wasn't weak either. It was honest. The crowd quieted. "I'm sorry this night didn't go the way any of us expected." My heart pounded. I could feel the fear clawing at me, begging me to retreat into performance, into safety. But something else rose with it. Exhaustion. Deep, bone-heavy exhaustion from pretending my voice could carry everything I never dealt with. I've spent my whole life believing that if I sang well enough, I could outrun anything, I continued. Pain, fear, mistakes. Tonight, I learned that isn't true. Gasps rippled through the arena. My manager's face had gone pale. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't safe. "There are parts of my life I've been afraid to face," I said, choosing each word carefully. "Not because I'm ashamed of who I am, but because I was scared of what would happen if I stopped being perfect." I swallowed hard. My chest still ached, but it was a different kind of pressure now, release instead of collapse. "That fear followed me onto this stage tonight," I admitted. And for the first time, my voice couldn't hide it. The silence was deafening. I could feel the weight lift just slightly as the truth left my mouth. Not everything. Not the details. But enough. Enough to stop running. Security finally removed the man completely. I watched him disappear into the darkness beyond the crowd, a chapter closing in the messiest way possible. I didn't feel relief. Felt clarity. The show ended shortly after. No encore. No dramatic finish. Just lights dimming and people filing out, whispering, confused, emotional, shaken. Backstage, chaos exploded. Phone calls, raised voices, panic about headlines and damage control. But I retreated into my dressing room and locked the door. Alone at last, I sat down and let the tears come. Quiet ones. The kind you cry when you're not trying to be strong for anyone else. My body shook as the adrenaline drained away, leaving only truth behind. That man hadn't come to destroy me. He had come to expose something I could no longer ignore. I realized then what the night had really been about. Not my voice failing. Not security threats. Not public embarrassment. It was about control, and how tightly I had been gripping it. For years, I had been afraid that if the world saw my cracks, it would stop loving me. Standing on that stage, stripped of perfection, I finally understood the opposite truth. I wasn't afraid to sing. I was afraid to be seen without the song. And once that realization settled into my bones, I knew there was no going back to the way things were before. The days after that night moved slower than time itself. Every headline seemed louder than the applause ever had been. Some called it brave. Others called it reckless. Most tried to turn it into something neat and marketable, a moment they could label and move past. But for me, it wasn't a moment, it was a fracture. And fractures change the shape of things forever. I stayed home longer than planned. No cameras, no stages. Just quiet rooms and long mornings where I listened to my own thoughts without drowning them out with music. It was uncomfortable in ways I hadn't prepared for. When your whole life is sound, silence feels like punishment. But it was also honest. I replayed that night over and over, not with shame but with curiosity. Why had it taken public unraveling for me to stop running? Why had I trusted my voice to carry burdens it was never meant to hold alone? I realized something important during those quiet days. I had confused being strong with being invulnerable. Somewhere along the way, I learned that cracks were dangerous, that softness invited collapse. So I sang over everything, every fear, every regret, every unanswered question, and the world rewarded me for it. But the reward had a cost. I thought about the woman in the front row who cried as I sang, believing I was saving her. I thought about how many people leaned on my voice while I leaned on nothing at all. Admiration can be a lonely place when no one asks how you're standing up under the weight of it. One afternoon, I picked up a notebook and wrote without an audience in mind. No melody, no performance, just words. I wrote about fear, about control, about the strange grief of being loved for something that isn't your whole self. Felt terrifying. It also felt like relief. I started having conversations I had avoided for years. Real ones. With people who didn't care about the image, only the person. Conversations where I didn't have to explain myself in lyrics or harmonies. Where silence didn't mean failure. And slowly, something inside me softened. I didn't stop singing. I never could. But I stopped asking my voice to save me. I let it become what it was always meant to be. An expression, not a shield. The next time I stepped onto a stage, it felt different. Not lighter. Not easier. Just truer. I wasn't there to prove anything. I wasn't there to outrun fear. I was there to meet myself where I was. I still felt nerves. I still felt pressure. But I no longer believed they meant I was weak. That night in Chicago had taken something from me. The illusion that I could carry everything alone. And in its place, it gave me something harder but far more honest. The permission to be human. Looking back now, I understand that my voice was never the problem. The problem was the belief that I had to earn love by being flawless. I didn't. And neither does anyone listening to this story. Somewhere behind the applause, behind the lights and expectations, there is always a quieter truth waiting to be acknowledged. Mine waited until my voice faltered to finally be heard. And when it was I didn't break, became real. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what you've been carrying silently, believing you have to face it alone. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to never miss the next story.